Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, June the 25th, 2024. Maybe I've got too many subscribers. Okay, it's less than 5,000, something like, I don't know, 4,600 and something, but maybe that's just too many. Maybe it's time to lose some subscribers. And a good way to lose subscribers is to talk about Ukraine, to sound off on the subject. And because, on Sunday, there was an attack on a beach in Crimea. Ukraine used cluster weapons, and, cluster weapons, that's quite a controversial thing to do. I understand Ukraine and Russia, and as well as the United States, have not signed any ban on them, so they haven't agreed to not use them. But still, you would have thought the United States would have some sort of moral compass. But no. It provides Ukraine with cluster weapons, which Ukraine uses against Crimea, and in this case, one of its missiles went off course a bit. It was flying over a beach area anyway, and it blew up, and children were killed, other people were killed, a lot of people have been injured. And, the United States is not just providing these weapons, it's also providing all the targeting data, and probably by using a drone, one of these Global Hawk drones, to help Ukraine attack Crimea. I mean, you could argue really that the United States is really being an accessory to a terrorist act. And on that day, Sunday, also we had an attack in Dagestan, where I think some Islamic group attacked a synagogue and a church. People were killed, a priest was killed. So it was a bit of a black day in Russia. And I do want to consider what was happening on Sunday. And I want to look at some charts. I want to look at the chart of Russia. I want to look at the chart of Ukraine. I want to look at the chart of the United States. And I actually also want to look at the chart of Nigel Farage with reference to Ukraine, because it's interesting. We've had this great conformity about Ukraine in the West. Alternative views have not been tolerated. And Nigel Farage has had the courage, I suppose, if that's the right word, to suggest that maybe there was a reason for Russia to attack Ukraine. Maybe it was perhaps because of NATO expansion. He was at pains to say that it was absolutely wrong for Russia to attack Ukraine, but he just suggested maybe there was a reason. Maybe if the West hadn't have expanded NATO, this whole thing wouldn't have happened. Not a particularly controversial point, but still, he had got seriously condemned by other political parties in the UK. It just seemed very uncontroversial, but still, I think it would be interesting to look at Farage's chart and perhaps compare his chart with that of Ukraine. But first of all, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, June the 25th, 2024. That picture, by the way, is of the beach in Crimea, near Sevastopol, I think, which was attacked with cluster weapons. But anyway, I will be talking about that at a later stage. Now, in terms of what's actually happening today astrologically, I would have said really not a great deal is happening. We've got the moon still in Aquarius. The moon is in Aquarius all day. And it's the usual message with moon in Aquarius. Moon is in an air sign. There's a certain sense of objectivity. And I think that many of us are quite independent-minded. Though, if people try to tell us what to do, we might get upset, because the moon is making a square to Uranus. Really, that moon square Uranus is the aspect that really dominates the day. I mean, it's usually quite a minor aspect, but it is today the major aspect because there isn't much else going on in terms of direct aspects between the planets. So moon square Uranus, there may be a certain amount of stubbornness. We like to do things our way, and we don't like to be told. And as a result of this moon square Uranus, there could be arguments, because people are stubborn. And I suppose we have to work out how we want to respond to this moon square Uranus. Are we prepared to be at all flexible? Is there any room to be flexible? Or is it really worth holding on to things which aren't worth fighting about? And I think probably with this moon square Uranus, we have to work out what's important and what's just trivial and marginal. Because if it's trivial and marginal, we can compromise on that. So there is room for compromise if we're honest with ourselves. But many people are not going to want to compromise about anything. It's just too important. It seems too important. Of course, it's not important, but it seems like that. So we do have to realize that finding agreement could be difficult unless perhaps we are prepared to make a small compromise. But just remember, it doesn't have to be a compromise about anything important. Something trivial. Just give something away. And if you do that, there could be a big dividend. Now, as far as the midpoints are concerned, I wouldn't have said there's anything too dramatic going on. I suppose Venus is aspecting the Saturn-Pluto midpoint. It may be that, relationships could be hard work. I mean, we've already got moon square Uranus. Not much room for compromise there. But with Venus, the planet of relationships, aspecting the Saturn-Pluto midpoint, it's about people perhaps taking themselves seriously, taking their boundaries very seriously, being very defensive. So when dealing with other people, we do have to tread very, very carefully because it's quite easy to cause offence. And as well as that, the Sun is aspecting the Venus-Neptune midpoint. So, the Sun is who we are, it's our identity, but aspecting the Venus-Neptune midpoint, there is a little bit of confusion, particularly when relating to other people. Things just don't go to plan, and there may be plenty of false signals, people indicating one thing but meaning something else. And so, we shouldn't jump to conclusions about people's attentions and about people's intentions. And also, we must be careful how we signal our own intentions. I mean, we might think we're being clear, but actually it's quite possible that no one understands what we're doing, and they might actually misinterpret us. So if we find ourselves being misinterpreted, don't get too upset about it. Perhaps treat it as an innocent mistake. You can't expect everyone to be a mind reader. And if they misconstrue some of your verbal and non-verbal signals, be a little bit forgiving there. Now, turning to the heliocentric picture, okay, not a great deal going on, but I do think it's worth keeping an eye on what is happening heliocentrically, or even what is not happening heliocentrically. Mercury is at 27 Leo. Remember, this is heliocentric, with the Sun at the centre of the solar system, and Neptune is at 2759 Pisces. So we've got Mercury quincunx Neptune, in other words, making an 150-degree aspect. So Mercury is about our logic. It's the way we're thinking. and it's also about the way we're communicating. But Neptune is a confusing influence. We may misunderstand things. We may communicate in a way that is difficult. And yeah, people might jump to the wrong conclusions. And it is kind of similar to what I was saying about the Sun aspecting a Venus-Neptune midpoint. Things just aren't clear, and our own thinking on particular matters may actually be quite muddled. So probably it's a bad day for making decisions. And if we're trying to tell someone something, we should really keep it very simple. And it might be a good idea to repeat ourselves, just in case the first time round we weren't properly understood. Maybe we should repeat ourselves not just once, but twice. Maybe say it 3 times, 4 times. I think repetition may actually be appreciated. Another aspect that is starting to line up, it's not exact yet, but we do have to bear it in mind, is that the Earth, remember this is a heliocentric chart, we're looking at the Earth and not the Sun. The Earth is at the beginning of Capricorn, and the Earth is starting to move towards a square with Mars. And I think we're probably starting to feel that square between the Earth and Mars. And that square between the Earth and Mars could be a little bit tense. You know, we may feel that we really need to assert ourselves. We need to tell people who's boss, who's in control. Or maybe we're going to find that other people are the ones who really want to be in control. So control and power could be major issues over the next few days, and people might get angry quite quickly. And, you know, I've just said that there's moon square Uranus today, and, you know, there's also Earth square Mars. So try to keep it cool and don't get angry and don't be provocative. Unless it's essential to be angry and provocative. I suppose if you see something that really is out of order and you feel you have to say something, then I suppose you don't have a choice. But you don't want to cause more aggravation than is, strictly speaking, necessary. So having looked at that, I want to consider the 12 signs. Now, I must warn you, there is not a great deal happening today. So it may well be the case that my readings for the 12 signs are quite brief. So anyway, let's get going on the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, June the 25th, 2024. Aries. You would like to be sociable. You would like to be with other people. It feels like the natural thing to do. But it might not work out. For one thing, there could be a sense of disappointment. You know, you have expectations. You know, you want people perhaps to provide you with excitement. You know, it's hard work, Aries, having to be the person who always has to initiate, who has to create excitement. You know, sometimes it would be nice to let other people take the initiative, let other people provide the fun. But, yeah, you might be disappointed. Some people, in fact, a lot of people, just might not have the enthusiasm you are looking for. And in fact, they may be obsessed with stuff that you're just not interested in. Maybe they're just obsessed with their own lives and their own priorities and their own peculiar ways of looking at the world, and, you know, you're not interested, and it could be rather disappointing. So what do you do? Well, I think you have to let people be. You can't be pushy. If you try to push people into doing things your way, or if you try to excite people, try to create some action, you may get some real resistance, and the reason for that is because that there is this square aspect between the moon and Uranus. People just will be stubborn, and they might be actually particularly stubborn when it comes to issues relating to money, and then money may be an underlying theme which might not be immediately obvious. So if you find that people are reticent, it may be they're actually just concerned about how much things cost. So perhaps you might need to consider this and perhaps have some answers. Perhaps people actually are looking for reassurance about the financial side of things. Perhaps you need to reassure them that some fun idea, some plan you have or they're having, it is reasonable, it's not going to be expensive, and you don't want to have anyone exaggerate the cost of things, because it may be the case that something that seems expensive is actually completely free, or the cost of it is very little. So, just because you've got something lined up that might be enjoyable, it doesn't mean it has to cost anything. It doesn't mean it has to cost anything. Though, Aries, you shouldn't completely ignore the financial side of things yourself. Remember, Mars is moving through Taurus. Mars is your ruler, and so Taurus is quite a materialistic sign, and you may be in a little bit of denial about the financial importance of certain things, but I think you need to be honest. And if you're honest with yourself, I suppose you might recognize that a little bit of restraint might be in order. So when you sense that other people are worried about money, also consider the possibility that perhaps at some level you're worried about money as well. And so it might actually be a good time for being quite frugal. And just because you're frugal, as I've already said, doesn't mean that you can't enjoy yourself. Now, another aspect going on is the Earth is moving to a square of Mars. Now, this aspect between the Earth and Mars is not exact yet, but I think you can start to feel the build-up. And Mars is about your energy, how you want to assert yourself. And the Earth, I suppose the Earth represents the material world in which you have to operate. And it kind of mirrors what I was saying about Mars in Taurus. They are independent events, Mars being in Taurus, Earth moving to a square of Mars, but still they kind of have the same message. Earth square Mars, the world around you is too slow, it makes you angry. Mars in Taurus, things are too slow. Again, Mars doesn't really work very well in Taurus. So Aries. So Aries, it's just very important that you step back a bit and that you're not in too much of a hurry to make things happen. There is not a hurry. Try to be a little more patient. Taurus. The moon is making a square to Uranus, and this is arguably the main aspect today. And I don't think that this square between the moon and Uranus need actually be such a problem. You had, I think it was yesterday, you had the moon conjunct Pluto. Was it yesterday or the day before? Over the last couple of days there was moon conjunct Pluto, and I thought that may actually be quite a positive influence. And likewise you had moon square Mars recently, and these were dynamic aspects: Moon conjunct Pluto, Moon square Mars. These were dynamic aspects that could have propelled you forward. Yeah, they might have made you a bit angry, but sometimes anger is good because anger gets you moving. And it could be the same thing with this Moon square Uranus. The Moon is in Aquarius. You want to do your own thing. Yes, you're quite independent-minded, and you want to make progress on your own terms. And you perhaps recognize that in order to make progress on your own terms, you need to be an individual and you need to stand out as an individual. And, Uranus is in Taurus. It's been in Taurus for a long time. It's been in Taurus for years. It's still there. Okay, it won't be in Taurus forever. It will quite soon move into Gemini, but not this year. It's going to be in Taurus, and Taurus is your sign. Uranus is about you, the individual, and I think now is a great time for demonstrating your individuality. And in the process, I think you might be quite tough about it. You perhaps understand that things that are really worthwhile are not easy to achieve. You're going to need to have a lot of discipline, and there may be things stopping you moving forward, or at least you think they're stopping you moving forward. And if you want to deal with them, you've got to be dynamic, and perhaps you've got to be ever so slightly confrontational, but you don't have to be fully confrontational. You just have to confront whatever obstacles there are, confront them and get past them, and then you can start to be more relaxed. So overall, Taurus, it's a dynamic day. It should be a dynamic day. And if you set yourself an objective, a clear objective, there's no reason why you can't accomplish it. Gemini, you are perhaps trying to look beyond your immediate environment. You want things to be different. There's a certain sense of boredom creeping in. And, the usual haunts, the usual pursuits, they're just not as satisfying as they used to be. And as a result, you are looking for change. Now, the question is, where is that change? Where is the dynamism? And I think that the dynamism is actually within you. I don't think that it's out there in the outside world. I think that you have to find it for yourself. It may be in your unconscious. It may be about things you're dreaming about. What did you dream about last night, the night before? Maybe you dreamt about nothing. Okay, maybe you've got daydreams. Your imagination is trying to move in a particular direction, and there may be things you want which they might seem somewhat fantastic. Well, it's always important to be realistic, but just because something is fantastic doesn't actually mean that you can't achieve it. And although in some respects you're going to be somewhat wary of other people, you can certainly have an impact. Once you decide what you want to achieve, you can actually be very energetic and actually have a certain sense of drama. Maybe being a little bit over dramatic. You don't have to be crazy, but in some ways, people are looking for a bit of drama, a bit of excitement. And I think perhaps Gemini might be just the person to provide it. And maybe you say something that people weren't expecting, and they have to respond. And as soon as they respond, you respond back. And so that creates sort of a dynamic interaction. And I think that dynamic interaction could end up being pretty fortunate. Now, from a materialistic point of view, some Geminis are materialistic. They are thinking about money and their material prospects. You are actually able to change the agenda very suddenly in such a way that completely suits you. You'll have to get your moment right. Don't overthink it, but I think when the moment does arrive, you're going to be sensitive enough to know what needs to be done. And perhaps by mentioning money or putting forward one of your, a financial idea or a request at exactly the right time, you'll catch people slightly unawares, but, they're not going to reject you, I don't think. I think they will, once they understand what you're talking about, they will give you a fair hearing. And you might actually get what you want in a financial and material sense. Cancer, you're taking things rather seriously at the moment. You understand, Cancer, that things are somewhat complicated, that you have to do things in a particular way. And it's certainly not a day for sort of playing a fool. Or for taking things lightly, because it is serious. You understand that it's serious, and you also understand that if you don't take things seriously, then there could actually be serious consequences, and things could get out of control. And this is because the moon, which is your ruler, is square Uranus. So moon square Uranus is about things happening which were unexpected. They just come out of the blue. And once they start happening, you could, in certain situations, completely lose control of the situation. Completely lose control of things. So do be careful. But I think you will be careful, because right now, Cancerians are very cautious. You understand your limits, and I think actually you also understand the limits of other people. Certain people, people who you know well, I don't think are they're not really themselves today. They're holding on to things. They don't want to take risks. They're trying to sort of dwell in the past. They don't want to move outside their comfort zone, and they're not really prepared to listen to new ideas. And your ideas, however good your ideas are, in short term, they may not receive a good reception. But, just don't worry about it, Cancer. You don't have to be reliant on what other people are doing or saying, or how much appreciation you're getting. It's okay to just do what's important for you, and that, I think, should be enough. And also, Moon is in Aquarius. Be independent-minded. Don't be afraid of going to places that other people haven't been to before. Maybe a solo journey to somewhere a little bit offbeat, a little bit unusual, but which is also interesting, might be very satisfying. Of course, I don't want you to take solo journeys into anywhere dangerous, but it's just somewhere slightly off a beaten track that you can just go there, perhaps on your own, and discover a new reality, something that gives you, a new perspective. And with a new perspective, you can perhaps understand the wider world a lot better. Leo, you are not entirely yourself at the moment. You feel that things are a bit slow, and at the same time, Leo, I'm not convinced that really you understand what's going on. I think there's a danger, Leo, that you might get confused. Well, it won't take much to make you confused. And it will be difficult for you to just see things just as they are. You'll perhaps try to interpret things and to see things which don't actually exist. And perhaps your imagination is not going to be especially constructive. So, Leo, I think that it's important that you try to make things as simple as possible. But you also understand the role that other people and unexpected events can play in your life. So if you have planned things in a really detailed way, you're asking for trouble, because detailed plans have, by definition, no flexibility. Everything has to work in a particular way. And if one thing goes wrong, something else goes wrong, or at least one thing. If one thing changes, another thing has to change, and then it goes all over the place. So I think, Leo, it is important that you have some flexibility, and that you always have room to listen to alternative opinions. Those alternative opinions do matter. And just because you don't like what you're hearing, it doesn't mean you should just reject it, because you might actually be told something really quite important. And it doesn't matter what someone's intentions are. Sometimes someone can say something where they're actually just trying to put you down. They're trying to make you feel small, and they're just trying to come up with some criticism just for the sake of it. But it's up to you how you respond to that criticism. You don't have to worry about what another person's intentions are. You can actually say, fine, I'm going to treat that criticism as constructive, even if it's not meant constructively, and I'm going to use it to fine-tune myself, and I'm going to use it to fine-tune my strategy. And so, in this sense, everyone can be a plus in your life, even people who don't necessarily wish you well. Virgo, there are things you feel that need to be put right. You just know it. That just some things have just been messed up in the past, and now is the time to make a special effort to sort them out. And that's good. But you do have to be a little careful, because there's a danger that you have a very fixed idea about the way things should be, and you start organizing things according to this fixed idea, and to begin with it's fine, and then suddenly something happens, and you actually realize that all your preparations are for nothing, because you've just simply been too fixed. So you've got to try to be open-minded, and you've got to try to somehow predict what's going to happen next. Try to, or at least try to anticipate what's going to happen next. And if you are really trying to anticipate the next move, that really means that maybe the fewer plans you have, the better. You just have to be prepared. You're there, you're ready for anything, and you're ready for nothing as well. So if nothing's going on, that's fine. If there's lots of things happening, that's also fine. You're flexible. And as a Virgo, I think you should be flexible, and you can be flexible. Virgo is a very flexible sign. It's sometimes called a service sign. It's a service sign because it can respond. It can understand people's needs, people's problems, and can respond to them. And so I think as a service sign, that can be very, very useful. And this response can take many forms. And one form of response that may be appropriate is something very sudden and slightly out of character. Because, Virgos do have a reputation for being quite methodical and even being somewhat predictable. But you can do something that just comes out of the blue. I think it involves other people, involves the people around you, how you respond. I suppose people have got an expectation about how you're supposed to behave, and then you can do something which confounds those expectations. You do something that people just hadn't really expected, and in doing that, you change everything, and you actually gain an advantage. Now, that advantage may not be material. It may simply be in terms of popularity. Things have got a little bit boring, a little bit staid. And if a Virgo can do something unexpected and also inspired, that could be really amazing. And I think that the people around you could very soon really start to appreciate your dynamism and perhaps your courage as well. Libra. There are things you certainly want to do, and you may want to do them as quickly as possible, and I think you're going to want to do them your way. And that's a little bit unusual, at least from a point of view of a stereotypical Libran. Librans like to consider other people's opinions, and they usually don't want to rock the boat too much. But right now, I think that you're quite independent-minded, and really, you don't want to be told. And that might be a little bit surprising, and there could be some resistance. People had perhaps expected you to behave in a particular way, and that's not something you want to do. You understand that there are things going on that you need to take on board in your own way, and you can't be rushed. And your way is, I think, the best way, and I think it is quite individual, and perhaps more than usual, you really are going to respect and perhaps even defend your own boundaries. You, at the same time, seem to understand that the world is not an easy place. That few things happen quickly and without effort, and that there is resistance. Some people just don't want you to do things. And that if you want to make progress, you either have to get yourself into some kind of confrontational situation, or you have to do things your own way. And, being an individual, doing things your own way isn't necessarily such a bad idea, especially now, because, Venus, which is your ruler, is making a square with the nodal axis. And so, we've got the North Node in Aries, we've got the South Node in Libra. And so getting the balance right in terms of other people is really important. You absolutely cannot compromise. You can't compromise things that are really important to you. As I said right at the beginning of this video, part of what's happening today is being able to compromise on the margins, but not on things that are really important to you. And so with Venus square the nodal axis, you have to perhaps negotiate the right position for yourself, a position where you are in touch with people, where people listen to you, people respect you, also where you listen to them and you respect them as well. Everything's got to be reciprocated. And you have to negotiate that position for yourself. And if necessary, you may have to be assertive. You may have to lay down the law. But I think it is something you can do. And I do think that if you get it right, Libra, you can get a considerable amount of recognition. So really, Libra, it's just so important not to underestimate yourself, and don't shy away from controversy. And if something's not right, you perhaps have to be clear about it. You have to make sure that other people really do understand this. You might feel that you're walking into some huge argument, but I think if you sincerely explain the way you feel, I do think that other people will understand. Scorpio. Yesterday I suggested, I think, that Scorpios were quite serious. They were taking themselves seriously. They wanted to do things their way, and they weren't particularly in the mood for sort of listening to, what other people were saying. I mean, they could listen up to a point, but there were certainly limits, and it's kind of more of the same. You're certainly aware of the impact other people can have on you. You're also aware of your vulnerabilities. You're not always on your own territory. There are times when you find yourself being pressurized into following things according to other people's sets of rules, and you're not comfortable with that. I think you're realistic at the same time. You do understand that there are times when you kind of have to do things other people's way, but I don't think you do things other people's way with a good spirit. I think you'd prefer to be in control, and I think it might be best if you just are clear about that, and that you seek situations where you do have 100% control. If you're not in 100%, if you don't have 100% control, then you might get nervous, and the less control you have, in a way, the more unstable you become. I mean, I don't mean unstable in a sort of a psychiatric sense, but, the more nervous you become, and the more likely it is that you might feel that you have to suddenly assert yourself. So do consider that possibility, and, do take into account other people's sensibilities. You can be a difficult person to deal with. Just accept it. And that might mean that there may be times when you should perhaps step away from other people and what's going on in their lives, and perhaps, you might take the view that you don't want to be part of the problem. And if you can't be part of the solution, then a little bit of isolation might be the best thing. I mean, I'm not talking about, serious isolation. I don't want to sort of exaggerate it. And I just would remind you that this reading is just for today. Tomorrow things are going to be different. I mean, indeed, if you're in California, for example, or Hawaii or Alaska, then at the very end of the day, the moon actually starts to change its sign from Aquarius into Pisces, and I think that's going to be really a favorable change. I think things are going to be much easier when the moon moves from Aquarius to Pisces. But for most Scorpios, this sign change isn't really going to happen until tomorrow. But that is something to look forward to. Sagittarius. Well, you've got things to say, and you might take the view that it's a time when people should be listening to what you say, maybe. But you also have to consider the possibility that some of the things you say could be a little bit disturbing. You might try your hardest to be diplomatic, but somehow the words might not always come out right. And as a result, other people might respond in a way that you simply hadn't anticipated. So under those circumstances, we might say, well, Aquarius, if in doubt, don't, at least in a verbal sense. And I think the picture was pretty similar yesterday, because the problem is that we've got the moon is in Aquarius, and the moon is making square aspects. It's making, it's made a square aspect to Mars yesterday, and now it's making a square aspect to Uranus. In fact, Mars is pretty close to the square of the Mars-Uranus. Sorry, the moon is pretty close to the square of the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So just the things you say could cause a lot of trouble. And also be careful in terms of traveling. You might think that it's just very easy to take some kind of short distance journey. Sagittarians, they like to be on the move. And you might think that going somewhere is just a good way of getting some variety. I mean, maybe it's just something short term, just go somewhere for a few minutes and come back. It may not be that simple. So a change of venue, a change of personnel might seem a good idea, but a small change could just completely mess things up. Maybe because it's actually more confusing than you realize. So perhaps, Sagittarius, you should avoid making changes. If you are feeling comfortable somewhere, even if you're a bit bored, I would probably suggest that you just stay where you are and just enjoy current company, enjoy wherever you are. If it's boring, a little bit boring, I mean, so what? But, some Sagittarians are just going to feel that that's just not good enough, and that they really are going to want action. And it is true that if you make a special effort, the power of your personality can be noticed, and there may be certain people that just notice you. And it's perhaps what you're trying to do here is you're trying to bring down your fire. Remember, there's no planets in fire signs at the moment, but still, I do think, Sagittarius, you can bring down that fire in perhaps quite a dramatic and dynamic way, almost a kind of a sort of volcanic way. You don't think that there's any fire, but maybe there's fire deep down under the ground, hence the sort of the volcanic connection. And once people realize that you've got this inner fire, they will, of course, find you very appealing. And it's just a question of getting that inner fire out into, well, I won't say out into the open, but it's just getting people to realize that you've got something special to offer. And it's not always going to work. Some people may not be responsive to your special charms and your special abilities, but I think if you try hard enough, you're going to find the audience you are looking for. Capricorn. Financial matters should not be ignored, and you're a Capricorn. You do understand the importance of money. The financial and material element can never be dismissed, and I think that you do like to organize your finances, your own way. You have your own way of doing things, and as far as you're concerned, that really is the right way of doing things. But there could be some disruptions, or perhaps you just have to suddenly take into account of a situation or perhaps a financial pressure that you hadn't really taken into account. You suddenly have to realize, oh, this is something new. I have to incorporate it, and it could be, in the first instance, somewhat disturbing. But if you're honest with yourself, it's not entirely unexpected. And I think once you start to really engage with the issue, then I think that you can make good progress. Though progress requires you to be open-minded, and of course, obviously, by definition, to sort of move perhaps from one state to another. And this might not be something you actually want to do, Capricorn. You may feel that you just want to just stay where you are. And even if you kind of know that something should be changing, you're just not going to want to change because it just seems like too much effort. But I think maybe at some level you're being unreasonable. You're hanging on to something that is past its sell-by date. And if you continue to hang on to it, it may have a negative impact on you, perhaps on a financial level, perhaps also on a sort of a creative and inspirational level. So try not to be stuck in one state or stuck, doing things one way. There are several ways to do things, and possibly the way that feels most comfortable is not actually most useful, and you may be just holding yourself back. And I think that would be really quite unnecessary. And at the same time, you have to accept that other people are changing. It's easy to kind of think that people don't change. We all do it. that what someone is like today, they're going to be the same tomorrow, and you can count on them. But no, I don't think that's necessarily the case. You have to allow people to change, and perhaps you'll realize that certain people have a side to their personality that you really hadn't seen before. And your first impulse might be to not fully respect this side to their personality, but that's not the right approach. If you accept people as they are, and also as they present themselves, then you are doing the right thing, and you have a good chance of being able to maintain friendships and relationships. So if you want stability and you want things to just stay on an even course, then actually you are going to need a little bit of flexibility and tolerance. Aquarius. The moon continues moving through your sign. It's sort of now in late Aquarius, and it makes a square to Uranus. I think this square to Uranus could be a little bit of a problem. It can make you quite stubborn. I do understand that actually Aquarius is quite a stubborn sign. Aquarius is fixed. It doesn't really like to change. Once it's made up its mind, once it knows where it's going, it just wants to continue. And change can be threatening. And it might be something that it resists. But I think that you need to get the balance right. Too much change, particularly if it's imposed by other people, is not desirable. You don't want to deal with unstable people trying, telling you to do one thing one day, another thing the next day, making demands on you that are unreasonable. Some people are like that, and they may be people who should know better. Perhaps the members of your family could be, or people who know you very well, but still they are being perhaps a little bit unreasonable. And in that case, I think that it's going to be very important that you stand up for yourself. But try not to be overdramatic. And, as I've told people, in several places in this video so far, it's all about compromising on the margins. Yeah, you don't compromise who you are, your core personality, but on the edges you can make small compromises. People want to feel they've achieved something. It's like give away something small, and that will give someone a little bit of satisfaction. They'll think, okay, that's fine. Aquarius has given ground. That's all I need. Just go through the motions of giving ground. And in many cases, that is going to, I think, shut people up. Though, don't at the same time take anyone at face value. Some people, maybe a lot of people, aren't particularly clear about what they want. They are refusing to get to the point, and when they are being clear, or when they appear to be being clear, they may actually be being deceptive. I don't think necessarily consciously deceptive, but I just think that some people are just finding the truth to be a burden. I don't know why. The truth should be something easy, it should be something obvious, but for some reason the truth is not easily available, and people might prefer to be vague or even to lie. I don't think lie in a serious and malicious way, but lie because it's just easy, just easier. So if anyone tells you something, don't necessarily believe them unless you can really check the facts for yourself. But, if you are deceived by anyone, or you feel you're being deceived by anyone, I don't think you should necessarily see that as a bad reflection on anyone, because it just may be what's going on today. People are flakes today. Maybe tomorrow could be different. So I think Aquarius, you've got to sort of understand human foibles and human weaknesses, and just consider the possibility that how someone behaves and how one communicates today is not actually typical of who they are. Pisces, you, I think, give the impression of not being particularly dynamic. I think you almost kind of want to hang back and not really reveal who you are. So in that sense, it is a bit of a continuation of yesterday. I think that yesterday you were in that kind of mood as well. And, it's absolutely okay to be like this. You can't be active all the time. You can't be, a super extrovert all the time. You sometimes just need some space. And with the moon in Aquarius, getting ready to move into Pisces, but not there yet, with the moon in Aquarius, you're probably feeling that you just need to pause, because there's just stuff that you don't really understand yet. But the information is starting to make itself felt, and you may have moments of inspiration, moments of even dynamism, dynamic inspiration where you get people's attention, but they're just moments. They're quite fleeting. So don't feel that you have to just continue making an impression on the world. You choose your moment, you say your piece, you make an impression, and it could all happen perhaps in the space of 1 minute, and then you can fade into the background again. But you're not fading into the background forever. As I said, the moon is about to move into Pisces. In fact, if you're in California or Hawaii, Alaska, the moon actually goes into Pisces very late this evening. So I don't know, if you're up late, you might, and you're in the West Coast, Pacific, Western Pacific, you might just have a sudden change, and suddenly you feel that you've arrived and that you're ready to move on to center stage. But I think that is a bit of a minority position. I think most Pisceans are going to want to bide their time, and I think that is the right approach. And if anyone is suggesting otherwise, you can, I think, you can refuse, you can turn them down, or you can maybe better still just say, well, you're not quite ready. Maybe not today, but tomorrow could be different. And indeed, Pisces, I do think that tomorrow will be different. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. I think they were a bit briefer than usual, but as I've said, I don't think there is a great deal happening today astrologically. So let me now turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 14, which is possession in great measure. Now, this is really a very good hexagram. Some would say it's the best hexagram in the book, in the I Ching, because it does give the impression of money, stuff coming our way, and it just, feels good. But it's not just about money. It's what we have. It's everything we have. It's all our talents. It's our abilities. It's our contacts. It's our friendships. It's our status. It's how we're seen. It's everything we've got on all levels. And there are two moving lines in this hexagram. The bottom moving line, the bottom line moves and the top line moves. So with the bottom line moves, I think it's just important to be quite modest. It's like we know that we possess a lot, but we've got a lot of things at our disposal. Remember, I'm not just necessarily talking about money. You can have no money and still this possession in great measure is going to be of relevance. But there's just this confidence that you have possession in great measure and you don't have to shout about it. Indeed, it is best not to shout about it, because if people start to think that you do have loads of stuff, you might be attracting negative attention. Maybe there's jealousy, or maybe there's a threat. So just keep it to yourself, and in a sense you're at the beginning of something where you haven't been fully noticed. You're not on anyone's radar, and in a way that gives you a position of strength. Now, if you are thinking that you don't have possession in great measure, that you don't have anything, that you're just feeling miserable about it, and me saying that you've got possession in great measure is adding insult to injury, well, what I would say to you is just have another look at it. Try to alter your perception. Perhaps you are underestimating yourself, and perhaps you are not fully recognizing what makes you special. Now, the top line moves, and normally the top line moving in a hexagram it tends to be unfortunate, but not in this case. It would indicate that you are being recognized, that everything you have is coming together, and you are getting the support and perhaps recognition that you actually deserve. So really make the most of it, but don't be complacent. Again, you might be thinking, no, this isn't possible. You perhaps aren't fully valuing what you have, but I think it's important to value it all. And I think that this takes us through to the second hexagram, which possession in great measure moves to hexagram 32. Here's hexagram 32, which is duration. So what we have to do is take what we have and start to put it to use. And that means being patient and having a long-term perspective. Duration is not about just being suddenly very active or dynamic out of the blue. It's about having a long-term perspective, using whatever we have over the long term. And maybe that's the real key to possession in great measure. Possession in great measure means taking what we have and building on it and using it. And the more we use it, the more we have, and the more indeed, we feel that we do have possession in great measure. So action is important, because we have to perhaps maintain what we have, and if we feel we don't have enough, then it's this constant movement, constant, solid, unending movement that just keeps going, that builds what we have and stabilizes it, and actually gives us security for the future. And that's the I Ching reading for today. I think that's quite positive. I don't think it's especially dramatic, but I think it's giving us a clear indication, not just about what we should do, but I think it's giving us an indication about what kind of attitude we should adopt. So now I want to look at what is going on in Ukraine and Russia in terms of particularly in terms of these terrorist incidents. And so let's look at what's been going on. And so here is the chart of the attack on the beach in Sevastopol. So what happened was, so you had this ATACMS missile. It went off course and it exploded, and it was a cluster weapon, and a lot of people, well, some children were killed, others were killed, people were injured. I mean, I think over 100 people were injured. It was a serious event, and according to Sputnik, which I think is a Russian website, it happened at 12:15 p.m. quarter past midday, 12:15. So that would have been a time where everyone was sort of on the beach, and I'm assuming that's the right time. I did find it difficult to find the time. So looking at the chart in isolation, what do we notice? Well, it's not so dramatic in isolation. Okay, we could see Neptune on a descendant. I suppose you could see Neptune on the Aries point on the descendant. I suppose you get the image of Neptune on the beach, water. I think a lot of people who injured were in the sea. A lot of people got injured. I think got injured in the legs, apparently. And so that sort of fits as sort of a deceptive surprise attack from someone from the outside. That is, if you like, the enemy. And so there's our Neptune on the 7th, and you've got the Sun close to the midheaven. Just a reminder that it's it's close to noon, and the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. You'll see that Saturn and Neptune are about 10 degrees apart. So the Saturn-Neptune midpoint was around 24 Pisces. So we had the ascendant and the midheaven were on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. So Saturn-Neptune is about fear, things happening which I suppose we were afraid of. I mean, I suppose that is a constant fear, but it's sort of having to face reality with the water, the Saturn and the Neptune. It's just not a good time to be relaxing with the ascendant and the midheaven on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. I mean, I don't think it really talks about a cluster weapon. That's not really how I would read it. But in order to perhaps see the full sort of drama of a chart, it might be a good idea to look at the midpoints. So one midpoint that we have is Mars and Uranus 15 degrees apart. So the Sun and the Mars Uranus midpoint would be about 17 Taurus. So that means that the Sun is 45 degrees from the Mars-Uranus midpoint. In other words, the Sun is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And this aspect, I was talking about it over the last couple of days. It has been forming. So Mars-Uranus is about something happening, like an explosion. Or I suggested it could be to do with damage through heavy equipment, power tools, something like that. But Mars-Uranus is a very explosive energy. So you've got Sun aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and that could well be an explosion. I mean, just to give you an idea about what Reinhold Ebertin says about Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. I'm not saying it fits. I just want to see what he has to say. So Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. A sudden adjustment to new circumstances and conditions. A sudden adjustment to new circumstances and conditions in life. Injury. Accident. So I think that would fit very well. Or looking at Vita, looking at Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, to get an alternative view. So Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, he says, sudden bodily action, the energetic or fierce man, sudden injury to the body. So that does fit. Though, you might be saying, yeah, but that Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint would be all over the world. Well, what's special about Crimea? Why did it happen in Crimea? I'll come on to that. But another aspect we have is Uranus is aspecting the Sun-Moon midpoint. So the Sun-Moon midpoint is, I think it's approximately. I think it's approximately 10 Aries. And so Uranus is making a 45-degree aspect of a Sun-Moon midpoint. So again, the Sun-Moon midpoint is a crucial midpoint in any chart. And when you've got Uranus on the Sun-Moon midpoint, it's just very simple, an explosion. That's the pure nature of Uranus. Now, as far as what really is special about perhaps the Crimea attack is, in terms of the ascendant, and that's what matters, is the position of Mars. And Mars is on the ascendant midheaven midpoint. You can see it's squaring the ascendant midheaven midpoint that way, and it's also on the midheaven descendant midpoint. So the ascendant and the midheaven is of a time and a place. And so it tells us something about the time and the place. These people on the beach in Crimea, Mars. Mars is something really very violent. So that sort of fits. Now, who is responsible for this? Well, obviously, Ukraine and the United States are responsible for this action. This attack on civilians on the beach, a fairly terroristic attack, and we can see the fingers of Ukraine on this chart. Of course, no one's denying the fact that Ukraine was responsible for this. They are not denying it. But it's just interesting to look at Ukraine's chart and compare it with the attack on this beach. And now notice in this chart that look at Uranus. Uranus is at 25 Taurus, and the ascendant is at 25 Virgo. So Uranus trining the ascendant. Well, that's very nice, isn't it? Because it's a trine. Maybe it's very nice from a perspective of Ukraine attacking Crimea. Very nice from a perspective, perhaps, of American operatives helping with the targeting. But at least it's worked. Some people have been killed. That's great, isn't it? Uranus trine the ascendant. But looking at Ukraine's horoscope, when it declared independence, Mars is at 25. Mars is at 25 Virgo. So that's where Ukraine's Mars is. And so going back to the Crimea attack chart, the ascendant degree is, assuming 12:15 is the right time, that is the degree of Ukraine's Mars was rising at the time of the attack. And that Mars was also trine Uranus. So basically at the moment, Ukraine has Uranus trine its Mars. And so perhaps with Uranus trine its Mars, Ukraine is sort of having fun with all these weapons it's being provided. I suppose Ukraine might as well enjoy its fun while it lasts. So I think we can clearly see Ukraine at work in this horoscope. Then there is the other attack, which took place same day. Some people might say that these attacks are connected. It's not just a coincidence. Now, I'm not going to sort of use astrology to claim any connection between the two attacks, but these things are possible. If the United States could blow up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and really damage Germany's economy, this is a pipeline connecting Russia with Germany, and to blow that up, well, then I suppose they're capable of doing anything. Maybe. If the Americans thought it was in their interest to perhaps stir things up in Russia, perhaps stir up religious conflict and whatever, and if America thought that she could get away with it, I don't think we can say, oh no, America wouldn't do that. America's capable of all sorts of things. But, I don't think we can say necessarily that America or Ukraine was behind this attack, but we shouldn't say it's impossible. It just may reflect something difficult going on in Russia's chart at the time. So turning to this attack, obviously very similar planets. This time, I believe it took place at 6 p.m. in Durbet in Dagestan in Russia. We've got 14 Sagittarius rising. At first sight, I don't see anything particularly dramatic there. At first sight, so there's but then you look again, and you see, well, the IC is 604. The IC is 604 Aries, and the descendant is at 1450 Gemini. So what is the midpoint between the ascendant and the midheaven? Well, in fact, the midpoint is, I think off the top of my head, about 10.5 Taurus. So in fact, Mars is actually seems to be aspecting the ascendant midheaven midpoint, and I think there it is. Mars is on the ascendant midheaven midpoint. So in both attacks, Mars, both the Crimea attack and the Dagestan attack, Mars is on the ascendant midheaven midpoint. And again, the ascendant midheaven is the time and the place. So that is the attack. It's a violent event. So that assumes that the attack was at 6 p.m. I mean, that's the best time I could find at the moment. There's that, and likewise we've got Sun aspecting the Mars-Uranus midpoint as well. Now, as far as the Sun-Moon midpoint is concerned, here's the Sun-Moon midpoint. Now, we have the Sun-Moon midpoint sort of about it's about 13. It's about 13 Aries, and so 13 Aries means that you've got Mercury on the Sun-Moon midpoint. Now, Mercury on the Sun-Moon midpoint in itself, that is not really indicative of an attack. But then, if we look at hypothetical planets, let's just turn on the hypotheticals. There is Hades at 13 Cancer, and Mercury is also at... There's a Mercury-Hades conjunction at 13 Cancer. Of course, that Mercury-Hades conjunction was also there at the Crimea attack. And this Mercury-Hades conjunction was aspecting by square, the Sun-Moon midpoint. So Hades is a planet of criminality, of base actions. And so that would kind of fit what happened in Dagestan. Now, in terms of who the culprit was, now if it's true that the descendant is it's Gemini on a descendant. Mercury rules Gemini, and Mercury is in Cancer, conjunct Hades. 13 Cancer. What's at 13 Cancer? Got that? Just remember that. Mercury Hades conjunction at 13 Cancer. That's important to remember. I'll be coming on to that in a moment. But let's just look at Russia's chart. I've taken the chart. This is the chart. The Russia chart. I've gone for Christmas Day 1991. Now, Christmas Day doesn't have any. I've gone for December the 25th. It's not. Russia has a different Christmas Day. This is a sort of the Western December the 25th. It just so happened. I think that's when they put up the new flag after the fall of communism on December the 25th, 1991. Of course, in Russia, December the 25th doesn't mean anything. And what I noticed here is that here's Russia's Mars at 1912 Sagittarius. So what's happening is that Saturn is about to go stationary retrograde. So at the end of a week, Saturn goes retrograde at 1926 Pisces. So it's kind of square Russia's Mars. And so the next few weeks, it's slowing down. Remember, Stephen Arroyo, I think it was Stephen Arroyo, says that, when a planet goes retrograde, it's like your finger stopping in a candle flame and it hurts. Normally when it's not retrograde, you can pass your finger through a candle flame and it doesn't hurt. But here is Saturn stationary, square Russia's Mars. And so it's kind of not surprising that in the run-up to the stationary retrograde, we've got these two attacks happening on the same day. And I suppose we can expect more attacks. The question is, what is Russia going to do? So that sort of fits Russia's chart. I then wanted to just look at America's chart just to get some perspective. My point about America's chart is that America is a country that is obsessed with terrorism. Completely obsessed. It's always terrorism, the war on terror, and doing all sorts of things to try to deal with terrorism, like its invasion of Afghanistan, getting involved in Iraq, and the weapons of mass destruction. And it's all about a projection, really. There's Uranus, there's the USA with wide Mars-Uranus conjunction on a descendant, and that's its projection. It projects all this stuff, and it just likes to do that. It sees terrorists everywhere, except the one place it doesn't see terrorists is in terms of itself. It refuses to see itself as a terrorist country. And reality, as we saw with Crimea, they were coordinating this attack on civilians in Crimea through drones and satellite imagery. So that's one thing they're doing. And they've done it in the past. They blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And you go back further, you look at them overthrowing the elected government in Iran in the early 50s, Mossadegh. You think of, America talks about 9/11. 9/11, really big deal, this terrorist attack. But what would 9/11 mean to you if, say, you were a Chilean socialist? Because 9/11, September the 11th, 1973, was when America overthrew the elected government of Allende and installed essentially a fascist junta, which had an absolutely appalling human rights record. So, it depends, doesn't it? 9/11, and I suspect that more people were murdered by that regime than died in the Twin Towers. But, so 9/11, it kind of depends where you are, doesn't it? So that Mars-Uranus does get projected. By the way, in 1970 there was a Chilean general who he took the view. I think his name was Snyder, and he had something called the Snyder Doctrine. And the Snyder Doctrine was that the army should not interfere in politics. It's kind of quite reasonable approach. And the Americans, the CIA, didn't like this because they wanted the army to interfere in Chilean politics. So what did the CIA do? It had many attempts to have this man kidnapped, and in the final attempt to have him kidnapped, they ended up killing him. So where are the terrorists? And USA is so good at projecting, just projecting it, but in fact it's not really fully recognizing that it itself is a sponsor of terrorism. It's probably one of the worst sponsors of terrorism around. Now, I was just thinking about the Dagestan attack, and just a reminder that July the 4th, 1776, assuming that the United States came into being at 5:10 in the afternoon, July the 4th, 1776. Assuming that is the case, then we would have a descendant of 12 Sagittarius, descendant of 1221 Gemini, and we have the sun at 1319 Gemini. Sorry, 1319 Cancer. Okay, got that? 1319 Cancer. So that's why I'm talking about 1319 Cancer. It's an interesting coincidence, isn't it? Going, looking at the Dagestan attack, and this applies also to the Crimean attack. But looking at the Dagestan attack, we have got 14. We've got the angles. If assuming 6 p.m. is correct, we've got the angles are pretty close to the American chart. Plus, we've got a Mercury-Hades conjunction very, very close to America's natal sun. So this may be a time with this Mercury-Hades conjunction that where America is actually capable or is actually doing some really horrific things, completely horrific, immoral, criminal things. We don't know. And so we've already seen what's happened in Crimea with it getting involved in this attack on the beach. But maybe, who knows who was responsible for what happened in Dagestan? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just a coincidence. I suppose that's the thing with astrology. We always look for connections, and maybe we're just deluding ourselves here. One final thing is Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, just him suggesting that maybe Ukraine has been expanding. You know, the reason you've got this Ukraine problem is that NATO has been expanding eastwards too fast. I mean, quite reasonable thing to suggest. I think Donald Trump has suggested the same thing. It's not such a controversial thing, but he's got universal condemnation by the British establishment for suggesting this. And maybe by him having a courage, and it's not really a very spectacular thing to suggest, but by suggesting this, he's starting to move things on. Maybe people in Britain and the West are starting to recognize that it's not just a war that is all about one person being entirely responsible for it. In every war, pretty much, there are two sides to the coin. But looking at Nigel Farage's chart, his Saturn is at 1 degree 5 Pisces. And it's kind of interesting that his Saturn at 1 degree 5 Pisces is opposition Ukraine's Sun at 0 degrees 56 Virgo. Maybe that's an important contact between the two charts. Maybe through that Saturn-Sun connection, he's started the process by which Ukraine has been called out. Not just Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine is just a proxy for the United States, but he's just called the whole thing out. And so maybe that's a beginning, or where people in the West are starting to really ask questions about the war in Ukraine like they never have done before. So maybe the consensus, the really weird consensus that I was talking about at the beginning of this video, is starting to break down. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about the subject of Ukraine. I hope I haven't lost too many subscribers. I'm just trying to say how, trying to look at things how this is the way I see it. It's nice being in America with the First Amendment. And yeah, that's one thing I really do appreciate about America. I mean, I know people say you haven't got much free speech in America. And they say this, but reality is, I mean, I criticize America. I have criticized America a lot. But one good thing about America is maybe I'm being naive, but I do think that in America, you probably have more freedom of speech than anywhere else in the world. And so for all its faults, I mean, I do appreciate the First Amendment. Anyway, I've gone on for long enough. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, then I'd be really grateful if you were to subscribe. If you didn't enjoy this video, if it upset you, then then feel free to unsubscribe if you're already subscribed. So I suppose it depends, doesn't it? Anyway, thanks very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.